Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tech Guys Midnight Court. I am Pete the Tech Guy, half fedora, Doctor Who scarf. You'll notice I'm wearing the standard Doctor Who scarf instead of the season 18 one. And you'll notice that there is a different background today than you're used to seeing on the Tech Guys Midnight Court here. And for those of you who don't know, I am Pete the Tech Guy. You can find me at DaTechGuyblog.com. That's DaTechGuy blog.com. The Tech Guy on YouTube, the Tech Guy blog on Twitter, and elsewhere. And you can also find me on WQPH 89.3 FM, Shirley Fitchburg. Every Saturday, I host a Catholic show called Your Prayer Intentions, and your prayer intentions and requests are more than welcome. We are delighted to have you do them. Well, anyways, we have a different background today because today I am downstairs. I'm not in the bedroom. I am in the den today. We're doing the podcast downstairs. My wife is nearby. I don't know if I'll talk her into saying a few words, but probably not. But let's not get into all of that. Let's get straight into the topics of the day for today's podcast. Now, first thing we want to discuss, topic number one, has got to be the polls. And the polls are really something interesting in terms of what's been going on here today. The polls have been very, very funny. And what I love about the polls is that the left has been just dying for the polls. They've been jumping into the polls. They've been, oh my God, look at these polls. Donald Trump is going to lose big. We have the Daily Mail talking about how Trump is going to be crashing and burning. We have the Fox poll saying that he's down by 8 points. And everywhere I go online, or everywhere I went before I went to work today online, people were talking, oh my God, Trump is finished. Trump is finished. At least this is what our friends on the left keep tweeting out and keep insisting is going on, that Trump is going to lose. You can see all these polls going on that Trump is finished. And the problem with these polls, well, the problem with the Fox poll is, of course, that they oversample Democrats, which is a standard thing that our friends on the left do when they want to try and push a particular ideology. But I noticed something about the left when they talk about how Trump is finished and so forth. And this is a standard thing. Don't go by what people say. Go by how people are acting. It's very easy for people to say something and to insist that X, Y, or Z is true. But how they act tells you more than what they're saying. Because talk is cheap. Talk is very cheap. And an article that has a flashy headline that generates clicks is something that's much more interesting to folks. People want those flashy headlines. People want folks to be watching. Well, I noticed as people were tweeting out about the polls. The left was saying, yeah, Trump is finished. Trump is doomed. Trump is done. And there was a fella online I happened to notice saying that is listed as unstable. They're going to try and reconnect. Okay, we lost connection for a second. We're back online. Well, I had a situation where the guy saying, all right, Trump is finished. I said, all right, I will put $100 that Donald Trump gets reelected. And since you say he's down by 8 points, why don't you give me 8 points? Give me Donald Trump and 8 points, and I'll put up my $100, and you can go ahead and say, all right, Trump's got it. Well, oddly enough, whenever I make that offer, and I've made this offer more than once, no one seems to be willing to take me up on it. No, everyone's willing to throw an insult. Plenty of people are willing to throw an insult. People are plenty willing to say the presidency it does. We had one guy, we are witnessing the end of the Trump presidency. I don't think so. But they're willing to say all these things. But how many of them were willing? There was not a single person on Twitter who was willing to take my $100 bet. Now, $100 is not an insignificant amount to me. I mean, that's a little less than a day's pay for me. I just spent 8 hours in a warehouse working. I literally just got home 20 minutes ago, but I'm willing to put up that $100. And I put it out publicly, and remember, not just to my own followers, but to the followers of these guys. This guy who had 26,000 likes for his tweet saying, "We are witnessing the end of the Trump presidency." 5,000 people retweeted that. 5,000 and commented, 3,000 retweeted it, 26,000 liked it. And I put it out to all you guys, hey, I've got $100 that says you're wrong. I've got $100. You give me those 8 points that poll says, and I got $100. Now you would think of those 26,000 people who liked that tweet, convinced that this is the end of the Trump presidency, or all those people who looked at that article at the Daily Mail in England. And one thing about the Daily Mail, sometimes they'll break something that's really good because a lot of places on the left media here won't report them. But their primary thing is hits. They're looking for hits. They're looking for sensationalism. There's a reason why there are women in scantily clad women constantly in photos in the Daily Mail. They're looking for hits, and that's their business. So I'm not going to quibble with some guys trying to make a living over there. But I got to tell you, with all those people, you would think that there would be at least one willing to bet $100 or willing to give me odds. There isn't one rich Democrat. I mean, you don't even have to be all that rich. I know right now times are tough, so maybe a lot of Democrats don't have $100. But there's got to be. I mean, the Soros guys. You would think that one of them would just put up that 100 just to shut me up. But nope, not a taker, not a one, not a single person willing to put. They're willing to say Trump is doomed, but none of them are willing to open their wallets. None of them are willing to put skin in the game. And I think that's really telling. And again, don't go by what people say. Go by what they actually do. And people will always act, they always say things one way, but do another. They always say things one way and do another. And that's really, really what's been going on with these guys. And you got to remember, of course, too, that Twitter isn't real life. And this is something I've said many times. Twitter is not real life. And you should act accordingly. So when these people start talking about this, oh, yes, this is this, they're basically talking to themselves. It's an echo chamber. You've got an echo chamber there of leftists trying. Remember, and if you want a great example of this, take a look at the Bernie campaign. If you followed Twitter, you thought that Biden was finished. And this is, of course, before he decided to stop playing blithering idiot and you had the Me Too accusation coming up. It was all, Biden was definitely finished. He was done. Bernie was going to reign supreme. And then that was exactly the case right up until it wasn't. Remember this about, and I've said this before on this podcast, and I've said it on my radio station show. I've said it for 10 years. I've been saying this. Conventional wisdom is always absolutely, positively correct, right up until the moment it isn't. And conventional wisdom is whatever the media wants it to be. For example, the media, to quote Instapundit, is still pretending we can believe China's coronavirus numbers. And on a related note, again, this is from Instapundit, 5,000 funeral urns, shipped to funeral homes in Wuhan raise questions about China's true death toll. If they're shipping 5,000 urns now, odds are things are not going very well. And it's an alternate reality. And speaking of alternate realities, let's go to topic number 2, which is Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, I mentioned this in the last podcast, how I was really surprised that she made the move to hold up that bill. I was really, really surprised that she made that move because it was so politically tone deaf. But this weekend really took the cake. You actually had Pelosi going on the network news talking about how Trump is giving out crumbs or Trump isn't trying to help the average person. And I saw again and again, using Twitter as an example. On Twitter, we had a fella who was complaining that when the bill was signed, the relief bill, when it was signed, there were no Democrats behind him. How dare Donald Trump have this with no Democrats? And Pelosi's talking about it being just crumbs, just crumbs. Well, the problem with this argument is I'm old enough to remember when 46 Democrats voted to block that very bill. And if you were born a week ago, so are you. Every single Democrat in the Senate, after negotiating this bill, after going back and forth, after the give and take, and there's always give and take in bills like this. This is the way politics is done. This has been the way politics has been done in America. Is the only place where it was never done in America, believe it or not, was in the Confederate States. They actually had a rule that said every bill only could deal with one thing, which is one of the reasons why they never got anything done over there. That they found themselves. The theory worked a lot better. All of this stuff worked a lot better in theory than in practice for them. But it was just a week ago that they held up the bill, and then McConnell had the second vote at 1:30, and they blocked it again. And it wasn't until the backlash that they suddenly voted, and suddenly we're all for it. And now you have Pelosi saying, "Oh my God, Donald Trump's giving crumbs. He should be giving more." And people are like saying, "Oh my God, how come Democrats weren't behind it? How come they weren't at the signing ceremony? How come they weren't included?" You actually tried to kill this bill, and you tried to replace it with a 1,500-page monstrosity. And now you're bitching about this? Are you seriously doing this? I mean, I find this very tone deaf, and of course, the media is going along with it. The media's not questioning Pelosi on this because they carry her water, just like she thought they would carry the water when she tried to kill the other bill. Now, let's face it, this bill probably has several things in it that shouldn't be in it. There's a few giveaways, like you'll remember the Kennedy Center, $75 million. They just, after getting the $75 million, they just informed their musicians that they were all going to get laid off and not paid, which really says something about whose slush fund is this. But there's probably things in this bill I would not like. And I have to take a little bit of issue with the president in that they went after this guy who was going to force a recorded vote. For myself, if you're going to spend $2 trillion, I think people should show up for it. And not only this, let me give you another example. I work in a warehouse. There are about 20 other people in that warehouse who are with me, working an 8-hour shift. I'm there all day at my lunch. There are people near me. Now, actually, during my shift, people are pretty far away from me. I'm actually more social distance there than I am at home. My wife is a nurse. She's around sick people. It's coronavirus. She's on the front lines. My son works in a grocery store. He's constantly around people, and he's working 6 days a week. And when, we do all right, but we're not making tons of money. Members of Congress are making over $100,000 a year, considerably over that. And not only do they have these jobs, but they beg us for these jobs. They come and campaign, please vote for me, please do. Some of them spend millions of dollars to get this job because of the power and the prestige. Not for the money, obviously, because a lot of them will spend more than they'll do it. Although the spending is a little tricky because if they're buying ads, they can hire a member of their family. Okay, you're going to be my ad director. You buy my ads, and of course, you get a commission. So if you spend $50,000 in ads, and your son or relative is getting the commission for buying those ads, that's $7,500. So that's why they're always so anxious to raise money from you, because they're able to kick back for themselves. The amount of emails I get from the Republican Party asking me for money, I should block them, but I like to count them to see how much it happens. But that's what's going on over there. So these guys are raking it in. And of course, they have influence later. If they want that power, if they want that authority, why should they not be willing to take the risk that my wife takes every time she goes to work as a nurse, that I take every time I go to the warehouse right now, and my son takes 6 days a week at the deli, at the supermarket? Why are their lives worth risking, on their exposure worth risking on a daily basis, but the Congress people who beg for this authority can't risk it for a day for one vote? I think that's a legitimate question. And I think that's a question that deserves an answer. And that's why I'm not all that. Again, maybe the guy was grandstanding. And yes, if they had made measures where they could have voted remotely, I wouldn't have had that big of a deal with it. But I don't see demonizing this guy for making a recorded vote. But anyways, Pelosi and company have played games with this bill for a week. And now they're getting upset because they're not getting enough of the credit. They're getting upset because Donald Trump's name the signature might be on some of these checks. Are you serious after you tried to kill this stuff? Don't play these games with me. How stupid do you, I mean, granted, you think that the American people don't pay attention, and a lot of times they would, in normal times, they might not be. But these aren't normal times. People are paying attention more than ever because, first of all, they don't have much else they can do. And second of all, the people who are stuck at home and the people who want to get back to normal life. I mean, I am dying to go to Happy Jack's again. I miss that Happy Jack's buffet. I miss going out for lunch that way. They want to know what's happening, so they're paying attention. So when you stop playing these games, when you put on Joe Biden and he sounds like a blithering idiot who can't put two sentences together, it's a problem. When you try and block a relief bill when people aren't getting money anymore, who suddenly lost their jobs, that's a problem. And when the press does what they do to try and make it look like this is actually going on, like, oh, well, this is all right. It's bull. It's a lot of bull. I'm going to type something in chat, just a quick hi to everyone who's watching and anyone who is watching, because people have been popping in and out. I mean, it's just hilarious. And it's a miscalculation, and it's not only hilarious, it's stupid. I mean, granted, you have to play the cards you have. You're the Democrats. You got to play that. You play the cards you have in the deck unless you're going to stack it. And I don't blame them for trying. I mean, you're trying to win. You try to win the best way you can. But don't be stupid. Don't be. I mean, I can't handle watching the stupid from these guys. I think the stupid is really bad. But it's going to reelect Trump, which makes me happy. So I'll put up with the stupid for a while. Now, the final topic tonight. And the topic is going to be part of a post that is going up later on my site at DaTechGuyblog.com. That's DaTechGuyblog.com. And the post is about the analogy between what the president's doing and why we're in the situation we are and World War II. Now, most of you are probably not old enough to remember World War II. I'm obviously not. My father fought in World War II. And he was in the Pacific. And I heard a lot of stories. I hung around with a lot of veterans when I was young. My dad used to take me to the veterans things. My father-in-law served in Europe. My father, and while my father was in the Pacific in the Navy. And basically, the strategy for the U.S. for a while was a holding action. And I think with Corona, a lot of what we're seeing now, and when I came home, my wife was telling me that social distancing is going to not end on Easter, but end at the end of the month of April, by the way, which means we won't be doing anything for our anniversary, which is a little bit of a shame. I'd like to do something with my wife for our anniversary, but that's how things are at the moment. But this is a holding action, and I want to read you this piece. This piece is going to be up on my site around 7:40 a.m. Eastern Time. It's called "The Corona Holding Action: A World War II Analogy." And here's the piece. There seem to be a lot of folks on the left taking delight in the economic crash caused by the corona Wuhan virus, and who seem to live for the number of infected and dead to rise in hopes that it will lead to the defeat of Donald Trump. See my post, CNN's letter to Sean Davis. You check out my podcast that has that. It's I actually think it's very funny. It's a rewriting of Lincoln's letter to Greeley, saying that my paramount thing is to save the Union, and it's about the press saying my paramount thing is to defeat Trump, not to help or hurt the coronavirus or China or whatever. That's all they care about is beating Trump. Anything else comes second. Back to the piece. So, for the sake of those reading that drivel and those making those points, we're saying this from ignorance rather than with purpose, on purpose to try and change some minds. Let me explain something. Given the normal freedom to travel and interaction you have with people, you're not really going to stop the. And this is my opinion. I'm not. I don't claim to be a medical expert. I don't think you're really going to be able to stop the virus overall, because some people are going to still carry it afterwards. So the virus is going to die in some people, but some people don't show symptoms. I think you're not going to be able to eradicate it. I think what you really can do. I mean, you've got too many people who travel. We have the freedoms to travel. Even with the bans, there are people getting around them somehow. I don't think you're really gonna stop the virus. First in the biggest cities when it's more common, but eventually elsewhere. I mean, that's the nature of a virus. It's gonna spread. That's what viruses do. The real idea is to slow it down. All that's happened over the last 2 weeks and all that's going to happen over the next 4 has one purpose: to slow the virus down. Not to destroy it, although if we can destroy it, even great, better. Don't think we can, but we got to slow it down. Why slow it down? First, if the level of infection is low enough, our hospitals can cope on a national level. Now, you're going to get hot spots where the virus goes big because people did things stupid, like what we saw in New Orleans because of what they did with Mardi Gras, and what we saw in New York with the people being urged, "Oh, go out, go to these things." Tucker Carlson did a great. Go to the Tucker Carlson site and check out the video that he has of the New York commissioners and so forth saying, "Ignore these warnings. Go out to the parties. Go out to the events, and whatever." But the idea is to try and slow it down. If the level of infection is low enough, the hospitals will be able to cope. And secondly, it's to give the best and brightest time to come up with ways of treating the virus so that when it does spread, we can arrest it. I mean, if we had a treatment where if someone gets the virus, okay, we give them this thing, they'll be sick for a little while, but they'll recover. That's a win. And there are already signs of that coming out of France and other places, in Israel and here. And the drug that the president was optimistic about, despite the fish tank stories that we're getting from the media, seems to be working. He was optimistic. The doctor was cautious because doctors are supposed to be cautious. But it looks like the optimism was right. But the point is, it's all about buying time so we can strike. Back to the piece. Now, both of these goals are frankly within reach, and the measures already taken are contributing highly to that goal. Think of it like the World War II, when the plan was to hold in the Pacific and push supplies to England in the Atlantic until we were ready to land in North Africa. Because what we were doing was convoys. Other ships were getting sunk. The merchant marine was taking a beating from the German U-boats. But as long as the convoys were running and more ships were getting through than not getting sunk, England could hold on. As long as England could hold on, the Nazis could be held up. As long as the Nazis could be held up, we could build up until we could land in North Africa. Now, when there is a treatment that can prevent death available, then we're halfway there. Now, those are the short-term goals, but there's also long-term goals that we need to establish with this. And these are the long-term targets. Number one, give enough time to retool manufacturers to produce the items necessary in this situation. Now, it takes time to create the ability to create things, to manufacture. You can't just flick a switch in a day. I mean, now we have some 3D printing that some things you can do in a day, but most things on a grand manufacturing scale, you're going to need a week or two to retool machinery to be able to produce certain items. Second thing, we need to, for a long-term plan, We need to have enough time to move pharmaceutical production back to the States. A lot of pharmaceutical stuff was being made in China. That's suicidal for us here. That means that another country can decide if Americans can get drugs they need. Now, India, for example, is forbidding I mentioned one of the drugs that has been effective. India is forbidding it from being exported. And you can't blame India. They've got their own country to take care of it. And one thing I do want to point out, I don't blame the Chinese for trying to take care of the Chinese. I don't blame the Italians for trying to take care of the Italians. I don't blame the English for trying to take care of the English. And likewise, nobody should blame America for trying to take care of America, because that's our job. And that's Trump's job as the president of America. A lot of people seem to forget that that's the job. But if we are producing pharmaceuticals here, then we're in a position to have the drugs we need. I actually think we should have, how we had a strategic oil reserve, we should have a strategic pharmaceutical reserve. But that's a whole nother conversation that we should have. Number 3 is to develop a vaccine. A treatment is nice, but a vaccine means that it'll be arrested from spreading to people who haven't gotten it yet. That takes longer than just the basic treatment. And again, as we said, creating a strategic reserve of the various products, not just of the medicines, but of the masks and other things. So if this happens again, we're ready. And if this happens, maybe remember the last big pandemic, and I'm not talking about the one from a few years ago when we had thousands die from swine flu. I'm talking about the big one, like the Spanish flu. Stuff like that. If that's like 100-year event, people don't want to spend a lot of money on things that happen once every 100 years. But if you have a strategic supply of key items, then when this thing happens, we can jump over there. Now, once those things are done, we can move aggressively back to the piece again, knowing that no matter how much of a punch this has, we can parry it and counter it. And this is like the invasion. Again, this is like World War II, the invasion of Europe and the push in the Pacific. Despite the punch that the Germans and Japanese had, we could counter punch. We had the production, we had the ability, we had the time to mobilize, and we were able to do the counter punching. And one more thing. Some metropolitan centers, such as New York City, New Orleans, Chicago, New Jersey, and LA, might have a tougher time longer. They'll likely be under quarantine and restriction longer than others. And again, this is like World War II. This is like the island hopping strategy. For those of you who don't know your history, the Japanese had fortified a lot of islands in World War II, the various islands that they expected us to attack. And attacking the islands, there was a bloody business. U.S. Marines cost a lot of lives. And the idea was to get to islands so that Japan could be bombed, because planes didn't have the range of planes today. Well, rather than try and take all the islands, the plan was island hopping. Okay, we're going to bypass this island where the Japanese are. We have enough air cover that if they try to strike out, we can get them. We'll just leave them there. Let them die on the vine. We're going to jump forward. Now, they're not going to let New York die or New Jersey die. But if we can start up, let's say, Wisconsin, if we can get the economy in Wisconsin running, we should get it running. If we can get the economy in Kansas running, we should get it running. If we can get the economy in Idaho running, we should get it running. If we can get the economy in New Hampshire running, we should get it running. If we get the economy in Alabama running, or Texas, or any of the other states, every state that we can get running at normal capacity, we should get running as soon as we can. And if there are states or districts where we can't, we get some of the ones that can function to functioning. We can push extra aid to those states, extra doctors and nurses. And then when they're able to function, they'll function. And again, it's like the island hopping strategy. If you watch what the president and his team is doing, that's what they're doing. They're trying to beat this thing. If you talk to the doctor, you watch the doctor, you watch the others, they are trying to beat this thing. And it's not the same as just looking for advantage. Now, there are a lot of people, especially in the media. The Americans have really covered themselves in glory in this. And I talked about this last podcast. The media has not. There are a lot of people who are not worrying about beating this, but are worried about advantage, political advantage. People who are doing that should be treated accordingly. They should be called out for it. And it's gonna, and you should remember it. This is something that we're gonna have to. This we should remember the people who are just trying to play this for political advantage. Because if they're willing to play this with people's lives, if they're willing to do it now, they're willing to do it at any time. So keep an eye on folks like that. Keep an eye on that kind of strategy. Do not fall for it. Do not fall for it. Do not let yourself be conned. Now, before we go, I want to take a quick peek because again, I literally just got home a few minutes before. Want to see if anything is breaking. There's a video at Newsbusters that you're going to want to check out. The Washington Post prints basically a 3-page campaign ad for Pelosi. The Washington Post had a hilarious piece that they were tweeting out earlier today before I went to work saying the economic crash shows that economy really wasn't all that strong. Seriously? When American Indian and South American culture was decimated because Europeans came and they had no immunity to the smallpox, did that mean that those cultures weren't all that vibrant to begin with? That's just stupidity. That's just ridiculous. Was San Francisco a bad city because when the big earthquake hit, it couldn't manage? I mean, come on. Come on. And this is supposed to be, this is just ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that we're seeing that. I just can't believe that people are doing this, and I can't believe that people are falling for it. Let's see. And Lindsey Graham, I talked about Nancy Pelosi earlier. Here's a comment from Lindsey Graham about Pelosi. She's blaming the president of the United States for people dying because of the way he's led the country. That's the most shameful, disgusting statement of any politician in modern history. And it's a fair point. It's a very fair point. I mean, you actually had Chuck Todd on MSNBC on Meet the Press interviewing Joe Biden asking, does the president have blood on his hands? And even Biden was smart enough to say, that's a little harsh. That's a little harsh. It's just, these guys are just a joke. To say that it's a joke, it's a joke, it's a joke. Now let's check one other site I want to take a peek at. See if there's anything else of interest going on that you should be. Nope, nothing new over there. Well, I guess that will be all for tonight. I want to remind you that we are going to be back on Friday morning. Our Friday morning podcast starts at 9:15 a.m. We run about 45 minutes, and we take calls. I don't have a sophisticated call system. I'm just using my laptop. But my old 800 number from my radio show will redirect to my home phone. We'll put it on speaker. Hopefully the microphone will pick it up. We'll see what happens. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We'll have new topics to discuss, lots of new things going on, a whole week's worth of articles to discuss. And of course, DaTechGuyblog.com, DaTechGuyblog.com, with myself and my magnificent 7 writers, Juliet Baldylocks, Marathon Pundit, who wrote today he writes on Sundays. RH, the Navy bureaucrat who writes on Fridays. On Mondays, we have So It Goes in Shreveport. Pat Austin, the blogger, great work there. Christopher Harper, former Temple University professor, formerly a mainstream media person from ABC, writes every Tuesday. And of course, John Fournier, who kicks in on Wednesdays. So we have a lot of great writers here. Check them out. Support those great writers. And if you like what you've seen here from the podcast, and you like what you see from the blog, consider subscribing to the live stream on YouTube, because can't monetize YouTube until I have 1,000 subscribers. I'm in the high 700s. So I'm going to need more subscribers if I want to be able to monetize this. I'm doing this podcast specifically because I'm trying to get about $200 more a month in terms of tip jar. If you like it, up the arrow, give it a thumbs up. Consider hitting the tip jar. Again, we're looking to try and pick up another $200 a month. That'll keep things going pretty well around here. Help keep paying the writers, because our writers, we don't They don't write for free. We pay them over here. We've been paying them for years. We're not like the old Huffington Post that had all these people writing for free. Don't pay a lot. I'm not a rich guy. I mean, like I said, I'm making about $100, a little more than 100 a day at my day job. But if you like what you see, kick in the tip jar, give it a thumbs up, share the podcast, because that helps keep it going. Well, I want to thank you for spending about 35 minutes with me today, or especially this early in the morning. And I want to remind you that if you want to watch the podcast again, it's embedded in a post at my site right now. So you can go straight to the Tech Guy blog, send people to the Tech Guy blog, have them just click on it there, and they'll be able to see it. And of course, on our playlist, we have a podcast playlist. All the podcasts are there. You can check them out. I'm sure there'll be someone on the left. Once we get popular enough, I'm sure there'll be someone on the left doing Oppo research on what I say to see if they can get me banned. But until such a time, this is Pete the Tech Guy thanking you for spending this time with me. And the Tech Guy's Midnight Court is now officially adjourned. We'll see you on Friday. Take care, all.